As draft prep continues for NFL teams, they are getting some work done with impending free agents, new extensions, big money for Philadelphia Eagles wide receiver DeVonta Smith and Indianapolis Colts defensive tackle DeForest Buckner. What does the Smith deal mean to other wide receivers who are trying to get new deals done? All that and more coming up on today's Peacock and Williamson.
NFL analyst Brian Peacock and former NFL scout Matt Williamson bring you expert NFL analysis every day in less than 30 minutes. Get an inside look at the NFL on the field and in the front office with elite breakdowns to next-level analysis and in-depth information only for the real NFL fans. This is Peacock and Williamson, and it starts now.
Welcome to the Peacock and Williamson NFL Show. Brian Peacock alongside Matt Williamson at BD Peacock at Williamson NFL. Get those mailbag questions in, by the way, at those handles on Twitter, or drop a question in the YouTube comments. Appreciate all the everydayers out there that are subscribed on YouTube and everywhere you get your podcasts. Today's episode of Peacock and Williamson is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150. Win or lose. Visit FanDuel.com/locked-on to get started. All right, DeVonta Smith is the latest. Let's start there because there's a big effect on the NFL and a ripple effect for other wide receivers and wide receiver markets and trade markets potentially for guys like Aiyuk and Higgins and CeeDee Lamb and Justin Jefferson is going to get the biggest deal of them all. And as of Monday morning, we've got a new 3-year, $75 million contract extension that includes $51 in guaranteed money. That's total guaranteed, not necessarily fully guaranteed money. Remember, this is the first numbers are the ones that come from the agent. And that 3-year deal, Matt, starts after DeVonta Smith's 5th-year option. So essentially, it's a 4-year, sort of a little bit over $90 million deal in total that takes DeVonta Smith's contract through 2028.
So, a couple things. The term number one receiver is thrown around way too much. I've said this for decades, and I think Smith standing alone without A.J. Brown is a borderline number one. Like he'd catch a lot of passes in Carolina or wherever, so I think he's an exceptional player, and he's kind of the definition of a 1/2. I mean, a great 2 or a borderline 1, and that's a great compliment. There's only, 12, 15 ones in the world.
Yeah, there's not 32 ones.
No, not even close. So that's a great compliment to him. This seems like a bit of a bargain on the surface, though. The 5th-year option is not too bad for a player that caliber. It's a lot of money, but receivers are making a fortune now for tier 1 guys. And in turn, contractually, I do think he's a tier 1 guy. One name I just want to throw out there before I forget, though, is I'm curious what happens to his partner in crime from Alabama, Jalen Waddle. Same draft class, Tyreek Hill's looming. Like, boy, do people want to rip my heart out because I threw it out on Twitter. I'm like, I wonder if the Steelers could pry Waddle away from a team that's cash-strapped that has Tyreek, and if they sign Odell, and Miami fans weren't having any of that. I'll tell you that.
And it just goes to show, because Miami's probably trying to push that deal off as far as possible.
Right.
Where the Philadelphia Eagles got in front of this deal. And I think it's smart, because as soon as Lamb signs and Aiyuk and Justin Jefferson, money's just going to go up. So Waddle is probably going to end up making more than Smith in the end, but the Dolphins,
I think they're equal players, give or take,
Yeah. I'd probably take Smith, to be honest with you.
I think it depends what you're after, maybe who your complement is. Smith's a little more consistent. Some of the Waddle injuries worried me a little, but they have Tua to sign, like they have bigger fish to fry. That's why I know I went down that aisle,
And clearly the long-term play, because of age and everything like that, would be Tyreek Hill would be the one to go, probably plan, and not Waddle. Waddle's the long-term complement to your young quarterback. And similar dynamic to what we're going to see in San Francisco. They got to do a deal with Aiyuk potentially. Could they trade him?
Let me stop you there, because trust me, Steeler Nation is all a buzz. I haven't heard Aiyuk to the Steelers in a long time, but the last 2 days I am getting blown up with. Is there anything true to this? He isn't following San Francisco on Instagram anymore, so he's probably on the way out.
That was the big one.
Any more news?
That was the big one this weekend. He unfollowed the 49ers on Instagram, which, it's kind of become the wide receiver position on its own is just so interesting. The way the wide receivers act, the way that their contract negotiations go, the fact that their teams are more willing to trade them, even though they're also really willing to do big deals. Like the wide receiver position is really odd in the NFL, Matt, because it's they're getting paid like a premium position, even though there's tons of them in every draft, it feels like, but the hit rate isn't necessarily great. I think landing spot is a big reason why, potentially for wide receivers. But teams aren't willing to trade tackles and defensive ends and pass rushers and quarterbacks that are also being paid like premium positions, like they are willing to trade wide receivers. So it's being treated like a premium position, and then it's also not being treated by like a premium position. It's really strange what has happened to the wide receiver market in recent years.
So maybe cap guys would just laugh at me and be like, we're on top of this. But I feel like as a analyst, expert, whatever, that the NFL's not quite sure what to do with the receiver market today. You know, I mean, like, boy, things are changing quick. There's always such an influx of these guys coming into the league. I sure don't want CeeDee, Lamb, Aiyuk, Justin Jefferson to just walk out of here and get a comp pick. I mean, that's not cool. We've seen a lot of draft day trades for A.J. Brown and Stephon Diggs and Tyreek, and for the most part, they've pretty much worked out. You know, that's not like the Jamal Adams trade where you give up a ton and you never get anything in return. I think they can change teams pretty easily and fit the schemes and all those things. But then I also found it curious, guys like Deontay Johnson and Jerry Jeudy got very little in return, you know, and they're good they're good players, you know, they're not tier guys.
And it depends on, I guess, where your franchise is. Do you have a cheap quarterback? Do you have a young quarterback that really needs weapons? Then it might make sense for you. And then you get an expensive quarterback, and it's like, well, this quarterback's expensive because he's good, and he's going to have to, you know, he's going to have to help everybody else out. But now the Eagles are the first team to now have two expensive receivers and an expensive quarterback, which is fascinating.
Yeah. And you know, T. Higgins mentioned here, could the Bengals be that team with two expensive receivers and an expensive quarterback? It doesn't sound like they might juggle it one more year, but I don't think, you know, and then that money will go to Chase, is my guess. In fact,
we got to get back to the Aiyuk things. I never
answered the question
there, and then talk about, you know, CeeDee and Justin Jefferson and where all these guys are. Higgins recently said that he expects he'll probably play this year in Cincinnati, even though he has requested a trade and he probably wants a new deal. I think they're trying to just keep this going, and they're going to let him walk next offseason is what it feels like is going to happen with T. Higgins, which is interesting. Now, that doesn't mean there's not going to be a draft day trade potentially, and I think that can potentially happen. I think it's a little bit more likely that Higgins gets traded than Brandon Aiyuk gets traded. The latest on Aiyuk is that there was an erroneous report by someone who throws stuff out there all the time that's rarely accurate. And Ayuk's agent himself was like, yeah, you need better sources. So apparently, according to Ayuk's agent, he has not officially requested a trade or anything like that. But he did unfollow the 49ers on Instagram, which I don't know how important that is to a guy who's 25 years old. Would not be important at all to me. I don't think John Lynch cares, and it's going to make him any more money or anything, but maybe where his headspace is. So maybe in the next 10 days, we are going to have that trade request, because deadlines make deals, Matt. We talk about that a lot. And if a player who's not a free agent wants to, quote unquote, become a free agent, he gets his team to allow him to seek a trade, which means he can talk contract with a bunch of teams, and that'll raise his potential contract. Otherwise, once the draft passes, then you're talking contract with the one team that you're signed to, and that's it. I do think it's really smart, and I've said this before, the 49ers should try to get a deal done with Brandon Aiyuk now if they want to keep him before these other receivers sign. And we saw the Philadelphia Eagles do just that. And now Ayuk's going to want $1 more at least than what DeVonta Smith got. Matt, do you think Aiyuk is in the same, you know, borderline 1-2 category? Because I think, because he's a year older football-wise, so he's going into his fifth-year option this year instead of next year like DeVonta Smith. 3 years after this, he's still young enough to command a big-time contract after that. 3 years, 25. I mean, I feel like the Eagles might have even negotiated the extension for Brandon Aiyuk. I mean, give him $1 more, whatever, you know, because he's the next guy instead. But I think it's a perfect match as well, like as far as what tier the receivers are, what type of deal it was that helps the team and also lets the wide receiver potentially hit another huge contract after he proves he's a number one rather than a 1/2.
A lot to react there too. First of all, I wanted to commend the Eagles front office for being the first ones to do it. You know, they're a very proactive organization. They're very analytically driven. I think they're one of the smartest organizations out there. and they prove it time and time again because Smith, Aiyuk, Waddle, etc. I mean, they're not that much different. I mean, be the first one, get them a little bit on a discount. Back to Instagram real quick. I know it. I'm certain it makes more sense to a mid-20-year-old than it does a 50-year-old curmudgeon like me.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think all of a sudden the Bills, Jags, Steelers are going to get a one-round discount in trade because he didn't follow the Niners anymore. You know what I'm saying? As for Aiyuk, I think he's slightly better than Smith. I mean, I would call him a 1, and that's a little bit of a leap of faith because we know Kittle and Debo demand so many targets and the nature of that offense. But I mean, yards per route run, he was like 3rd in the league last year. I mean, I think he's an ascending player. I might take 8 wide receivers on the planet ahead of him. I mean, something like that. That's about where I value him.
Yeah, and that means there's huge value for him for what he's going to want and what another team might see as an opportunity to come in and get a wide receiver 1 that might even cost less than what a true already proven wide receiver 1 would cost. And that there's not probably one of those available unless you're trying to roll the dice in the draft. Okay, more on the wide receiver market.
Real quick on Aiyuk, I just want to throw this out there because like the Jags are about to pay Lawrence. The Bills are paying Allen like crazy. But like the Steelers, as you mentioned, have nothing invested in wide receiver. When I look at it through a Steeler lens, I honestly don't care what contract they give Aiyuk if they were to trade for him. I'm just worried about what you have to give up in draft picks. You know, like give him whatever he wants. I don't really care.
And I want to focus on that actually next in the trade market potentially for Higgins and Aiyuk, and then what this means for Lamb and Justin Jefferson as well as we approach the NFL draft next. Today's episode of Peacock and Williamson is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. It's the formula for winning championships, and it's also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. And it's super easy at eBay Motors. You find the big green check mark, you know it fits your car, and it's at your door very quickly. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car into the MVP and bring home that W. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. And I've been asked a lot about this, and, there's kind of the information game that happens, and there's bad reports and there's good reports. And, Ben Albright is someone that, usually is pretty connected and plugged in. He's one of the people that put it out there that the Steelers were interested in Aiyuk. Mm-hmm. And my response on Locked On 49ers when we talk about these things is, I think I've got a pretty good BS meter, and you start running things through, right? And we know the Aiyuk trade request is BS because his agent said so. Would Aiyuk like to be traded? Potentially. Would the team allowing him to seek a trade, even if he stayed, allow him to seek more money? Absolutely. So even if he did request a trade, just like Deebo Samuel a couple years ago, that doesn't mean he's actually going to get traded, but you can see why that would help him at the negotiating table before the draft, because you got 10 more days to try to figure that out and use that leverage and try to see if you can get something to happen. Otherwise, you're waiting until summertime to whenever the 49ers want to come back to the table and offer you something that you want to accept. And it's not surprising the 49ers have waited on Aiyuk because they've done all their deals in the summertime. And then when it comes to the rumored interest from a team like the Steelers, when you put that through the BS meter, it's like, of course, the Steelers need a receiver.
Badly,
Steelers GM is Omar Khan, right?
Yep.
Omar Khan would not be doing his job if he didn't call John Lynch about Brandon Aiyuk.
100%, right.
The Bengals.
Stephon Diggs, or right. Yeah, no doubt.
Higgins. Imagine him just not scouting wide receivers. You know what I mean? It's like, of course, he has to turn over every rock he can to improve his football team. Of course, the Steelers need a receiver. He has to make that call. Not only should he has to make that call for his organization, at least know what the price is and know that he doesn't want to spend his first round pick to trade for someone like Brandon Aiyuk, right? So that's where I'm at with the whole Aiyuk thing. As far as value, teams looking at it, I don't know what the offers would be. I don't know if a team would be willing to pay what the Niners would be asking, which is certainly a first rounder and maybe a first rounder plus, probably be asking something similar to what the AJ Brown trade was. What was that? A first and a third, first and a fourth, something like that. I think that's what the 49ers will be asking. Will they get that? I don't know. Would they even want to trade him then because they want to hit this Super Bowl window? I still find it doubtful, but it is possible. And maybe they know that Aiyuk doesn't want to sign at all. So they feel like they have to make a deal now, and they do have some cap stuff to consider. But from an outside perspective, from say a team like the Steelers, how could they not have some level of interest and at least had that conversation to know what the cost is?
100%. I mean, you're not doing your job if you haven't. I mean, I know for a fact Mike Williams was scheduled to visit the Steelers, but he signed a contract with the Jets. He would have been here the next day, and maybe they wouldn't have a need at receiver anymore. I mean, they know they have a need. I mean, there's no doubt, and there's many teams out there that fit that mold. I mean, there's more receiver needy teams than you think right now. Arizona, Carolina, I mean, et cetera, et cetera. And they're waiting for the draft, of course. But that brings me back to the timing. You know, like, in the Aiyuk situation, the Steelers situation, I've looked at this more through the buyer's eyes. But if I'm the Bengals or Niners, I think I can win the Super Bowl this year. You know, like, sure, I'd like a rookie receiver in the first round or top 50 picks. And that's probably not going to be a 1-for-1 Jefferson for Diggs swap, especially in 2024. It might turn into the better player, maybe. You know, and I'm sitting here from a Steeler perspective, like, hey, Lynch, I'll give you next year's first. And it's like, that's swell, but that doesn't help me win the Super Bowl this year.
Right.
Or,
yeah. That's where I think that the plan all along, and this hasn't changed at all for me, the Niners extend Brandon Aiyuk, trade Debo next offseason. That's the plan. Okay. Like, this is the Super Bowl window. And if the cap gets wonky in 2026 because you kept one receiver 1 year longer, so be it if you have a chance to win the Super Bowl. And then you start, Kyle Shanahan era 2.0 with an expensive quarterback, an expensive Bosa, and you start losing Trent Williams, and you start losing Debo Samuel, and you start losing Christian McCaffrey. Like, that's going to happen down the road. So you have to do what you can to try to win that Super Bowl right now.
No doubt.
That has to be the plan for the 49ers. So that's why
Purdy's going to need a contract one day. And,
right.
You're not paying $1 million for your quarterback right now. I mean, so that never really added up to me. But instead of talking Steelers, Niners, what if we talked Bengals, Patriots for Higgins? Like, to me, if I take May or if I take a receiver, a quarterback early, I would love to give you next year's second for Higgins if I'm the Patriots, and then draft another one at the beginning of the second round this year.
Still have the third pick, and I guess the same would go for the Carolina Panthers. I just put them
exactly.
Right. They both have a similar second round pick, early second round pick. Pick number 33 for Higgins, I think is the right value. Pick number 34, 35, whatever it is, the Patriots have early in the second round for T. Higgins. I think that's the right value. Would they try? Here's the other part of it is
I'd try to swindle you and be like, I'll give you the 2025 second for Higgins.
Well, that's what I'm saying is
right.
The other part of this is why this type of deal might happen on the clock.
Yeah.
Maybe the Steelers are sitting there and, Talise Fuaga goes at pick 19 and they're like, dang,
crap. Right.
The three wide receivers we would have drafted and the three tackles we would have drafted are gone. Let's get John Lynch on the horn. Now it's worth making this pick or this trade. Maybe
draft couldn't have went any worse for us.
Right. Yeah. Or maybe when the Carolina Panthers are on the clock, Ladd McConkey and Adonai Mitchell went right at the end of round one. And they're like, shoot, okay. Cincinnati Bengals pick 33 for T. Higgins. Will you do it? Or let's try to do a 2025. So I think on the clock trades is where this could potentially go down.
But the sellers still want to win the Super Bowl this year. I mean,
yes, yeah.
You're not trading Aiyuk for McConkey.
I think especially the 49ers
especially the Niners.
We've lost 2 Super Bowls. We've lost NFC championship games. Yeah. We are all in right now to win a Super Bowl. We're not going to worry about a draft pick next year and the cap space in 2 years. We're trying to win. Like they put void years in 2028 on Yetur Gross-Matos' 2-year contract in free agency, right? Like just they're trying to win right now. They're not as worried about the future. The future will be the future. And if they win, then that makes everything a lot rosier in the future when they really start to have to make some tough choices. I think those tough choices for the Niners happen in 2025. For the Bengals, I think it's not as pressing immediately. And I think they're in a better opportunity to compete without Higgins than the 49ers would want to losing their receiver. Does that add up
Especially
too
if
much.
like Brock Bowers fell to 18 or, something like that.
Yes, yeah. And
Or
there's
they
a
take
situation
Thomas from
too.
LSU at 18 and then deal Higgins for the early second. Like that's how I kind of see that going down.
And the other
Plus,
thing is
go ahead.
for the Bengals, they have their future wide receiver in house already. For the Niners, their future wide receiver is more Aiyuk than Debo because he's a couple years younger. And I think his body will age better just because of the style of player they are.
Mm-hmm. And the other thing I wanted to add too, I mean, also, I think the Bengals doesn't sound like a lot, but the Bengals signing a right tackle to decent money, a starting right tackle, takes them not out of the right tackle market at 18, but it's not, you don't have to do it. Before it was like this gaping hole, but so then they could take the receiver or Bowers, deal Higgins, get a better pick than they would if he walks. And frankly, I'm not cutting on the Bengals, but it's basically a fact. I mean, they view things differently than most teams. They're less frugal than they used to be. I mean, they were like the cheapest organization in the league for a long time, but now they're a little more free spending, but they'd never trade. They're hard to deal with. I don't think they're chips all in from ownership quite as much as the Niners are, in terms of aggressive win now, bump contracts down the road, that type of thing. So just in different places, different ownership.
You touched on something that I want to get into next is how teams are preparing for the draft and what the moves that are happening right now and that have happened since March and free agency can tell us and give some hints about what teams are about to do in the draft. Let's talk Colts as well. DeForest Buckner extension in another wide receiver needy team that I want to mention here next is the Buffalo Bills late in round 1. This episode, Peacock and Williamson, is brought to you by Monopoly Go. I've been told I'm a competitive person, and I think that's somewhat true. I do have a competitive side. We all do, and my competitive side is a big fan of Monopoly Go. And I'm sure you've heard of it. It's been downloaded over 150 million times. It's a great twist on Monopoly, where you play on not one, but hundreds of Monopoly boards in crazy locations, building up amazing cities that bring you big money. But the best part is competing with your friends and messing around with your friends and stealing riches from your friends' vault. I can charge them rent on my iconic properties, just like the classic Monopoly. And the leaderboards show me who the biggest Monopoly tycoon is. But it's not just my competitive side that loves it. You can team up with friends and people all around the world in timed tournaments and earn huge rewards. So get in the game and join your friends. Download Monopoly Go, now free on the App Store or Google Play. This episode is also brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sports book, and it's playoff time in the NBA and the NHL. Major League Baseball in full swing, and FanDuel is your place to bet on every single game. And right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150, win or lose. Bet on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks, all in an app that's safe, secure, and easy to use. And best of all, those NFL draft props at FanDuel. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet an automatic win. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. To finish up the wide receiver portion of this conversation, Matt, the Buffalo Bills. The Buffalo Bills obviously have a need at wide receiver, but the reason they're trading veteran wide receivers is because they're in the expensive portion of their quarterback contract, which probably points to less of a Higgins Aiyuk type of a trade, even though I could see them wanting to be more youthful than Diggs. And I think there was some other personality stuff with Diggs that might have led to him not being in Buffalo anymore. And if the right wide receiver isn't there for you at pick 28, Brandon Beane, is he going to be aggressive and go up? What do you think the game plan is right now for the Buffalo Bills at 28?
I think the game plan goes back to you're not doing your job if you don't at least call. Is you're calling Atlanta and Chicago and saying if Rome Odunze or one of those top threes there, what would it cost me? And they're going to tell you a ton. And then you're going to say, well, I don't have a ton, sorry. But I'm at least calling. And then I think you start really monitoring A.D. Mitchell and Brian Thomas. And from about pick 15 to 24 or something like that. And say that's more reasonable. That's striking distance. They have #1 capabilities. Yeah, I could settle for a McConkey or a Worthy or somebody at my pick. And that's not all bad. That's option number 3. But if I could get one of those two that are a lot different than what I have, downfield ability that could develop into a star, I'm going to be aggressive to try to nab one of those two.
Less likely that they trade for one of the veterans, right? That's what it feels like.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think Curtis Samuel's is kind of a sneaky fantasy guy, by the way.
And, Khalil Shakir, they've got those
Yeah,
underneath.
right.
So Brian Thomas, I mean, that's a fantastic fit. I mean, that's one of my favorite.
That's the one I love.
In the second half of round one. If they can go up and get him, the wide receiver.
Josh Allen buying a little time, letting that guy get 80 yards downfield and he flicks his wrist.
And then opening up for everybody else that they want to do on offense. I love that fit for the Buffalo Bills.
I'm coming around on Mitchell a lot too. I think Mitchell and Thomas are close for me. I prefer Thomas, but
I don't know if Mitchell. I would need to meet Mitchell face to face. That's kind of where I'm at with him. There's big time bust potential there, but completely has elite level tools. It's just
one thing I wanted to mention though, because you made me aware of like how he jogs through routes, that he does a lot, and you could put together an awful low light tape for him. But the other two receivers that are going to get drafted do it as well. So I think it's a Texas coaching thing. But I would definitely need to sit down with them.
It's less for Worthy, and his teammate Worthy is probably going to go after. I don't know. He ran a 4.21. He might be the surprise high wide receiver pick in this draft. Worthy. He had better numbers than Adonai Mitchell. So why didn't Adonai Mitchell, why wasn't he like the true guy there? Adonai Mitchell had
a tight end and a third receiver.
Yeah. He had 3 or fewer catches. By the way, Quinn Ewers, the quarterback there, when I was watching, it was like, ooh, people were talking about him. It was like, hey, future first-round pick. I was like, what are you talking about, dude? I was just like that tape at all.
Super high recruit that's not really that good at football, by the way.
No, I didn't think so at all. I was not impressed with Ewers. We'll see what.
And I hate their offense overall, by the way. It's
I hate all the calls. I hate watching college football. It's not good football. I can't stand it. It's hard to evaluate guys when all you do is 1,000 bubble screens a game. Like, what are we doing?
We could do a show in the middle of the real downtime of watching college film versus NFL film has to be much more of a gap than watching minor league baseball or hockey or basketball. I mean, it's a different sport almost.
I'm watching offensive tackles and they're running 100 plays a game and they have 5 true pass block reps because the quarterback never takes a 5-step drop. You never actually see a tackle have to block a defensive end for long enough that it would take to get a sack in the NFL. So you don't really learn a lot, even not only about the passing game that you're trying to evaluate, but about the pass rushers and the pass protectors.
Amarius Mims has 104 true pass block sets in college football.
In his career.
104.
Yeah.
And like 2 of them were against like Georgia State and William and Mary or whatever, where he could do them blind.
Talk about a guy who's scary. I think those are the 2 biggest boomer bust prospects in this draft. Is Amarius Mims and A.D. Mitchell, because they could be elite superstars with what they have physically. But man, you're hoping, you're flipping a coin and you're crossing your fingers when you're making that draft pick in the first round for sure.
No question.
One more quick thing I want to run by you, because you talked about DeVonta Smith, Brandon Aiyuk, borderline wide receiver 1s and where they're at. And CeeDee Lamb is a wide receiver 1, but is it only because of usage? If you put Aiyuk in Dallas, if you put DeVonta Smith in Dallas, would they be the ones that you're like, oh yeah, clear wide receiver 1, and CeeDee Lamb is like, oh well, he's he's not the number 1 option in this offense anymore because now he's in San Francisco, now he's in Philly.
Partially, but I think he's the best football player of those guys. I mean, Justin Jefferson's better than him. I mean, I know he's he's a one everywhere.
All of them, so he should just wait till they all sign and get the big one.
I think Lamb's progressively gotten better and better and better and better. So I do think his situation's awesome. He's probably a little bit better for fantasy than he is the real world, which he's awesome for fantasy, and he's just really, 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 really good for the real world, So we're splitting hairs, but I would rather have Lamb on my football team than Aiyuk or Higgins.
And Higgins is a clear high end 2, not a /1 for you.
If Smith is the line, Higgins is below him, and Aiyuk is above Smith.
Okay.
You see what I'm saying?
I think I'm right there with you. I think Smith and Aiyuk are right in the same zone. I think
I prefer Aiyuk.
They're the wide receiver 1/2 now, but after 3 years of a contract where they're treated like the 1, then we're probably talking about a true wide receiver 1 for both those guys. I really like both those players.
I do too.
DeForest Buckner gets another contract, extension here with the Indianapolis Colts. And speaking of 49ers draft trades, that was a shocker when the Colts gave up number 13 to the 49ers to trade for DeForest Buckner, who the 49ers allowed to go seek a trade, which is maybe why they don't do that anymore. And they wait until the summertime to negotiate contracts with these guys. So maybe that's part of the reason. Maybe a younger, more naive executive in John Lynch allowed that trade to happen to go when they called his bluff. Because the story there was, he said, okay, agent, we don't think you can get this contract more than what we're offering, but go ahead and see if you can find it around the league. And if you do, make sure you bring back a first round pick. And agent said, okay, called back, got you a first round pick.
Yeah, and a good one too.
Got the deal we're looking for. And then John Lynch is like, oh, I guess, okay, you called my bluff. We got to make this trade. But a 2-year, $46 million extension that ties Buckner to the Colts through the 2026 season now.
I love it. And there's a group of these defensive linemen, Calais Campbell, DeForest Buckner, Cam Jordan, Cam Hayward. There's probably a one or two I'm missing, but those guys all come to mind. Jordan and Hayward have never left their respective teams. Two of those guys have won Walter Payton Man of the Years. They're awesome leaders, true professionals, probably not quite Hall of Famers, but they're going to be in the Saints Ring of Honor, that type of thing. I think you invest in those guys all day long,
Really quick, another note here from Adam Schefter right before we started recording is Cowboys wide receiver CeeDee Lamb is not expected to attend the start of Dallas Cowboys voluntary offseason program Monday while he awaits a new contract extension heading into his fifth-year option season. I'm sure we're going to hear the same thing about Brandon Aiyuk and potentially T. Higgins as well as they try to, negotiate those contracts. And yeah, you're not going to show up to team activities and get yourself hurt while you're trying to get that big deal done. So those are going to be topics that, whether or not there's draft day trades, those contracts are going to be looming all summer long. And we're going to be talking a lot about wide receiver money, I have a feeling.
We can talk about it more when they start happening, these camps, but I've been there for them. They're not missing much. I'll tell you that. I think they'll be just fine as players, and they are voluntary.
Right. Voluntary. Yeah. And then OTAs are
still not missing much.
Yeah. And I don't think we'll see those guys then either. So
no, you're gearing up to trying to get the rookies to figure out how to practice in the NFL.
Right. Yeah. Just get the young guys ready, get those futures contract guys ready to go and have everybody practicing on the same page once OTAs do get going.
Yeah. You're teaching the 5th round safety not to blast the receiver over the middle. I mean, you don't have anything to prove. We're all teammates here. Things like that, are just going on there.
Thanks everybody
for making,
Thanks for making us your first listen here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Make sure you check out the Locked On NFL Mock Draft Special. It is going live this week, Wednesday, April 17th. You can find it streaming starting at 7 Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific on the Locked On Sports Today 24/7 streaming channel, which you can also find on Amazon Fire TV. The mock draft special will also be here on the Peacock and Williamson feed, along with the Locked On Scouting feed, Locked On NFL Draft feeds as well. Look, Matt and I, part of the host panel, as we have been every year here for the mock draft special, which is always a lot of fun. All the hosts on the network, just a really fun 6-part series. That
is spectacular.
Yeah, it is spectacular. Just finished recording it and excited for you all to see it starting this week. Make sure you check out the new 2024 Locked On NFL Mock Draft Special. Matt and I back tomorrow right here, Peacock and Williamson.